Hello and welcome back to the Boropolis podcast. We are back after the international break, and as always, I am joined by Nathan. We have plenty to get into. We have, of course, yesterday's 1-1 draw at Oxford to discuss, news of a new head coach, the confirmation that some fella that happened to be head coach of Middlesbrough earlier on this season, who shall not be named, is, officially no longer here, and neither is Harry Watling. So, quiet international break, really, Nathan.
Yeah, a little bit of a weird one, isn't it? The last few have all brought up question marks, usually about Boro's attack and things like that. But obviously, this one was the whole, well, we know that Edwards is going. It's yet to be confirmed, but it will be within days, which it was. But then came what was sort of navigating through the betting markets, seeing whose name would appear and whose name would rise to the top. And the first week was relatively quiet, wasn't it? The first week of the international break. And then over the weekend, in between the games, it was apparent that Raphael Wiki was the favourite on the betting odds. And then murmurs sort of came through social media that he'd been at Rockcliffe, he'd spoken to Kieran Scott. Whether that was formal or informal, it wasn't really confirmed over that weekend. And then all hell broke loose on the Monday, didn't it? Which was, well, initially Dom's article that Wiki had been at Rockcliffe and it was more informal. He'd given a presentation, they conducted interviews in London the week prior, and nothing really was anywhere close to being done. And then, literally an hour later, news from Sweden breaks that Kim Hellberg of Hammarby, who looked set to take charge at Swansea, and literally, like, Swansea fans thought it was going to be announced on that Monday that he was going to be taking charge, that that move was no longer going to happen, and that he was taking a job at Middlesbrough instead. And that was just like complete and utter shock and disbelief. And you don't really know how trustworthy
Yeah.
or reliable sources are overseas. And then it became apparent very quickly that this was going to happen. Yeah, very, very interesting for a Monday morning.
Yeah. I mean, I was just about kind of recovered from the weekend, recovering from locking myself in the bedroom, crying over Wolves fans saying that I look like the Ibiza final boss. And I thought, right, start of a fresh week, quiet, ease myself into the office on the Monday morning, see Dom's article, posted that, and then just all of a sudden start getting a load of notifications. And I'm like, right, okay, I'll have a look here. And as you say, it's a bit of a strange one because the way in which I know some people kind of make the point of why do you share news from this outlet there? We know they're not reliable or they've got a bad track record. And with English journalists or British ones, you kind of know which ones are going to be bang on the money and which ones might not be. With a Swedish one that you haven't to translate in the first place, it's always a bit like, do we take this as gospel? But actually, when it was, I can't remember the outlet's name now and the journalist, but it was quite quickly kind of understood from our end, and also actual Swedish people and Swedish football fans on Twitter saying it was, yeah, like as reliable as it comes. As you say, it was very much a case of, okay, this is happening. And I think really it was just an interesting sort of timing thing because, as you say, we'd seen Dom's article literally on the morning, very much a case of there's nothing too advanced. And then all of a sudden, what I did notice is in the betting odds, his name, Hjelberg, popped up on the Monday morning. So there was obviously like a little bit of a whisper going round. And then obviously all of a sudden we get confirmation and kind of once Dom says it, we kind of know that it is gospel truth and you can say, okay, that's happening. And I think the timing aspect of it's really interesting because as you mentioned, obviously Wiki was at Rockcliffe on the Saturday, and it's quite a quick turnaround from Saturday still speaking to people, whether it be in a formal or informal. I think it was pretty informal in all honesty, and then getting to the Monday, and it's like right. Boro have decided on their man. They're going to pay a compensation fee for the first time ever, and everyone's kind of like, where did that come from? And I think, look, I'm kind of putting two and two together, but it seems to me that Boro had obviously spoken to Hjelberg on later the week prior in London, as you say, and basically the only thing that doesn't really add up is it was kind of reported in a way which, as you alluded to, Swansea were kind of that far down the line. They were expecting an announcement on that day, and then we dived in, and it kind of feels like Middlesbrough have spoken to him. I don't know other names that were interviewed, but Wiki was one of them, and they've got to Monday morning or Sunday evening and just thought, he's impressed us that much, and basically, if we don't act now, we're not going to get him. And this is no disrespect to Swansea at all, but I think when you're offered both of those jobs, and obviously what Wolves fans don't understand is his club in Sweden were very much happy for him to speak to clubs. It's the end of their season, obviously, in Sweden, and there was an acceptance that he was going to go. But from Hjelberg's perspective, club well backed with a really good squad, sitting second in the championship. There's been lots of conversation around the fact that a job like this never really comes up. And I think what we'll get into now is the fact that actually it's not only, I guess, a little bit of an unknown in terms of I didn't know who Kim Hellberg was until about a week ago, but not only that, he is unproven, untested, obviously never worked in England before, has only ever worked in Swedish football as a coach. And I think what a lot of Middlesbrough fans, I mean, we didn't really talk about it all too much, to be honest, in the last podcast that we did, but very much a case of, do Borough just need a safe pair of hands? Do Borough just need to kind of not try and reinvent the wheel here? Get someone that's going to see them through perhaps a few months or maybe even until the end of the season. Pick someone that knows the league or at least knows English football and kind of go with a safe option. I think now looking at things and looking at the betting odds, the only sort of safe pairs of hands that were in those betting odds, or what people might have thought that of them, of those candidates, there was never really a standout candidate in terms of an English or a British manager, or even other than Corberan, who was in a job and he's not going to kind of step away from Valencia. I don't know, my perspective on it has changed a little bit where I think, well, yes, the timing of it could have been a safe option or sensible to get someone that knows the league, but really, A, who was there, and B, we've spoken about all of the problems in attack. So, yes, stylistically, we'll obviously talk about that as well. It's going to be a big change for supporters on the eye, but Middlesbrough are in a position of strength. So if they believe in Hjelberg enough, and clearly they do, then you've got to take a little bit of risk to get a reward ultimately sometimes.
Yeah, 100%. I think with it being so early in the season, I guess, like we've still got two-thirds of the season to play, that it's not like we've only got a third of the season to play and we're in this position and we're just going to sort of need someone to push us along. The question marks have been mainly around our attacking football, really, more than anything else. And just sort of looking at Hellberg's track record in Swedish football. Obviously, his first stint was at a club called Värnamo, who he brought up from the second division into the first division, stabilised them, and then got his move to Hammarby, who are a bigger club in Sweden. Finished second in both of his seasons with them. Last season, which is probably the best to go off, really, given he's been able to put a stamp down, get his imprint on that team, was that they were top of loads of metrics, weren't they? Really, possession, open play, expected goals, expected goals against, pressing intensity, lots of metrics that on the eye you want to see from your team. But the question marks that will come from supporters will be, we're in the middle of the season. We are literally going into the period of a season which is the most hectic, where including yesterday, we will play 11 games in 45 days. And is he really going to have the time to be able to change things and tweak things to fit his team with, from what we heard or what we can hear and look at in his track record, is usually a 4-3-3 or a 4-2-3-1 team with high emphasis on the wingers providing the width and directness when we don't really have the personnel to be able to do that. So that's one big question mark around him. But he's a young up and coming coach. He's been successful so far in his two roles that he's had. What I will say is that it's sort of like understood in Sweden that last year it was sort of like Hammarby's chance to win the division. Malmo are usually the team that win the league every year, and they fell off a cliff last year, finished sixth. And Hammarby, being top of all those stats, as we've spoken about, ended up finishing second to a team called Mjällby, and they won the division for the first time in their history, like a Leicester story. So yeah, I suppose a little bit of a red flag, but it's sort of, without watching them week in, week out, you don't know what have fallen in their favour or out of their favour, whether it be injuries or whatnot. So yeah, but it's mainly style of play and going from Carrick, which was possession, as we know, and sort of being a little bit narrow as well, really, which obviously suits these players that we have currently, then to Edwards, which was completely different to Carrick, more pragmatic, more emphasis on being stable at the back first, and now seemingly going back the other way towards a Carrick style of, right, we're going to have the ball and we are going to try and create lots more chances. And I think it's difficult for me to say that would be prioritising attacking football, considering Hamabi's defensive numbers were also fantastic as well,
Yeah,
top of the
yeah.
division.
I was going to say that's kind of having watched, as you know, all Middlesbrough fans will have done, watched every video that I could possibly find, watching the way that he even goes on himself in team talks. In terms of kind of the data and the results, as you say, what's settled me down a little bit is, although, like you put it's not the kind of first priority to defend and then kind of hopefully create something. It's very much he's a manager that's gonna want his teams to take the game to the opposition. The defensive numbers are really, really good. Like again, top of the Swedish metrics. And obviously we should kind of caveat that by saying it's the Swedish league. I mean, I don't happen to watch a lot of the Swedish league. I'm not fully aware of kind of the standard of where it was at or what it would even be comparable to. But you know, the championship's its own monster, really. It's like totally different to any other league. So I think there's going to be plenty of heart and mouse, plenty of men and women of a certain age demographic frothing at the mouth when Solbrin's playing little cute passes into his centre halves when they've got players up their arses. There won't be kind of long humps out of, I was going to say out of play, but just up the pitch really. But it's interesting because I've seen a lot of sort of analysis and those videos are really helpful. But what I've seen from supporters of his previous clubs and also other Swedish journalists is that actually he is quite adaptable. And even though his team might look one way, it wasn't necessarily kind of a style approach where he's not going to change his principles at all in terms of a formation. It's very much there's principles and kind of key ways and chance creation and things like that that he really values. But it's not just going to be like, for example, 4-2-3-1 and that's it. So it, it's really interesting. I don't think if you've listened to this podcast for long enough, you know that me and Nathan are not going to kind of make up nonsense for the sake of making up nonsense. we're really going to need to see what he's all about. But I think it's just, in terms of the whole situation, and obviously we'll get on to AD as well, a massive gamble. But my way of thinking about Borough taking that gamble and the timing of this gamble has changed from initially thinking, what on earth are we doing, to why not? Why not take the risk?
It's a step into the unknown for all of us, isn't it? Really, I mean, look, we've had one foreign head coach in our history prior to this, which was obviously Aitor Karanka, and we know how that went. But this feels slightly different from the perspective of we, when Karanka came in, we were sort of on the bones of our backside a little bit, and he had to build a team. This team has been built in a way that suited a former manager, and then it's been tweaked a little bit in the summer to fit Rob Edwards and his style of play. And look, they've been relatively successful in that. We still sit in second place in the championship with what, a week of November left to go. And now in comes our second foreign head coach in our history with a real opportunity to sort of lay down a little bit of a marker for himself to prove what he's all about and seize the opportunity of taking a team, well, hopefully towards the Premier League at the end of the season. But yeah, it'll certainly be very interesting to see what he goes with initially. I think we'll sort of struggle this week to see what goes on. Obviously, we know that obviously he didn't take charge yesterday. Adi took charge. We'll get on to him in a second. From what we understand, Kim won't be in charge for Coventry on Tuesday night, and his first game will likely be Derby next Saturday. I'm unsure that he'll have much, if at all, any impact against Derby. But then when he's got a week on the training ground before Hull, you might see a little bit different of a setup or a formation or even just a style. He might just tell his wingers Bergzorg and Worker get the byline and put crosses in the box rather than cutting inside and just kicking the ball off a defender. But yeah, it's very exciting. And obviously with that, we've paid compensation for a manager for the first time in our history, £270,000 around that mark. Been in talks with Hamabi for Hellberg's assistant, which is David Salini, and Anes Maravac.
I think that's a good stab at that, Nathan.
Yeah, it's not too bad. So th those two, which is very interesting, but at least you're bringing in his trusted bodies. In the
Yeah.
past, we know what we've done with managers and not bringing their backroom staff into the football club, but also, which I think will be important in regard to the transition from just Swedish football towards the championship and having know-how of this division, which is keeping Adi on that coaching staff. I'm unsure how much impact Adi has. I think that it's sort of thought of by a lot of this fan base that he is like the oracle of championship football because of what Coventry fans had said previously. But you can sort of make the case of right, well, when he left Coventry, it went downhill and then Robbins sort of got found out. But then you can point towards, well, Robbins is third in the championship currently. So you can make a case either way. But AD will definitely help with the know-how of the championship. It's probably the biggest coaching staff we've had for a while, isn't it? With like three
Yeah,
assistant
I
coaches.
was going to say potentially we've got obviously the head coach, two extra coaches, and then also AD. And you're kind of thinking, well, we're going to look like Nuno's coaching staff when he was at Wolves, where there's like 11 of them in the technical area. But, you know, they done pretty okay. So if that brings us to the same level of success, then great. But yeah, in terms of AD, I know it's a bit of an interesting one because unless you're an employee of Middlesbrough Football Club or one of the players, you don't really tend to see exactly what happens on the training pitch or how much of an impact that AD was having. There's an understanding that he's one of, if not the best assistant managers, but kind of it's from, yes, all the success that him and Robbins had together at Coventry, and obviously he worked and had really huge success in Chelsea's academy at various different age groups and developing players. And I think what was really interesting, I know a lot of people have spoken about the press conference that he did prior to the Oxford game, but he spoke about the fact when he was asked about would you ever long term, whether it be at Middlesbrough or elsewhere, want to be a head coach? And he was very kind of keen to point out that he has no interest in being a manager, but in terms of the role of being a head coach, that's where he absolutely sees his strength, and that's the only kind of role in which he would be, I guess, as like the front man, the main man. That's the only role he would ever be interested in about developing players, doing what he feels is his best attribute, which is developing players and getting the extra, I think he said 10-20% out of these players by working on them or working with them rather on the grass. Now, in terms of him staying around, he's been fairly non-committal about it and kind of almost tried to play off whether he is going to stay, whether he has heard any word definitively from the football club about whether they want him to stay. I have no doubts, and I mean, from obviously Dom and Scott, they are very confident in the fact that AD is going to stay. However, whether there's a time frame on that, whether it's a case of he's just going to kind of oversee the transition and then he might step away, it's very much up in the air. But what AD also spoke about heavily in his press conference prior to Oxford was the fact that he's a really loyal man. You know, he stayed at Coventry for a number of years, he stayed at Chelsea for a number of years. Even in his playing career, I think he had quite a lot of long spells at once or certain specific clubs. And I think there's probably no doubt that he would like to stay, but whether, we're also talking here about, in real life, he might meet Hellberg and think he's a knob. There's no kind of guarantee that their personalities might not clash, and I hope not. But I don't, I'm sure it's probably been mentioned in the interview process, and I would like to think the club have said we have someone here that we very much value, who we think will absolutely be of benefit to you and the coaching staff that you're going to bring with you, and that'll have been spoken about in the kind of application process. But as I say, it's not kind of one of them where he said, yes, I'm going to be staying regardless. And it's probably not his place to say either. But I think it is interesting, that dynamic, and as you say, having a kind of coaching staff that big. But from some of the points that you have made, and just to say, I completely agree with you. If we're going to say, and again, I totally understand where you're coming from, in the sense of we don't know what AD does on the grass, or kind of his reputation. It's not from thin air, but it's almost difficult to say why. This is going to sound really harsh, and it's not meant to be, but we don't see him day in, day out, and yet he's kind of got this, as you put it, like a whole fanfare around him. And I think that's down to the way that he talks, because he's an immense talker, and the way that he's conducted himself since the whole Rob Edwards situation. But in terms of him actually staying and the benefit of him staying, as you've put it, his understanding of the league, his understanding of the different challenges in the championship, the atmospheric challenges, going to, I know we've played Millwall away, but going to different grounds and kind of explaining how certain atmospheres and certain crowds, certain away games might kind of feed into a performance a little bit more, that you might have to, in certain fixtures, probably not try and risk playing out from the back in the first 10 minutes and almost ease yourself into games because of the physicality of teams, the different styles, the different, as I say, crowds and stadiums that you're going to play at. Just an understanding of players, the league, English football in general is something that Hjelberg and his coaching staff have never experienced at all. That, but also the fact, and just going back to a point that I made previously, in terms of what I've read up on Hjelberg, it's very much that yes, he's got these core principles, but in each of the jobs that he's had, he's come in and assessed a squad and then kind of stuck with his principles, but formed almost like a structure based off what is there for him to work with. Now, AD's only going to help with that by saying, yes, I think, I don't know, Riley McGree could do this role, but he could also do this role. And I'm sure getting a job like Middlesbrough, Kim Hellberg's last week has probably been spent just watching hours and hours and hours of footage of Middlesbrough. So he's going to form his own opinions. But in terms of characters, in terms of, man management and how certain players might react this way to certain decisions or what might get the best out of them, the continuity of the situation is there is no drawback at all to keeping 85 Ash around. And by the way, I'd like to apologise to 85 Ash because I spent the last podcast calling him Vivesh, and then he actually explained that it is Vive Ash, and that he's been having a chuckle at all of the journalists pronouncing his name incorrectly. So 80, apologies, mate. If I ever see you or have the chance to meet you, I will buy you a bottle of red as a sorry for doing that on the podcast. But yeah, I think we've done the kind of Hjelberg situation and discussed it as much as we can, really, because ultimately we're still very much kind of total. It's going into the total unknown. So I don't want to kind of pretend that yes, I know exactly what formation and what team he's going to pick on Saturday based off highlights I've watched. I'm certainly not suggesting that, and I think a lot of analysis it's sometimes very much very helpful, and there's been some great videos and pieces of content that I've seen, but also it's from potential neutrals or supporters of other clubs. I saw one video where it said, well, and we had a bit of a chuckle about it. Hjelberg might opt for Senny Dieng. I would be very amazed if he comes in and drops Solbrin, who's been outstanding for Middlesbrough this season. I've seen a lot of people saying, oh, I'm a bit worried about Dale Fry playing in a high line. Dale Fry's played for countless Middlesbrough managers, and he's always found a way to get into the team because he's one of Middlesbrough's best central defenders. Now, there might be a workaround of him playing in a different formation or doing things that he's not quite used to, but he's still going to be one of Middlesbrough's best centre halves. So, yeah, there's a lot to see, a lot of excitement in terms of just anticipation of what we're actually going to get out of our second ever foreign manager and our first ever manager that we've paid compensation for. So, yeah, a very exciting time. All of that was going on last week, but we did actually have a game yesterday, Nathan. And I think ultimately, in the end, one of those results that you're going to look back on and think, it's not the worst result in the end, but I can't help but feel coming away from the game yesterday. I mean, two major frustrations. Obviously, the fact that we didn't win the game, but there was just so much words and profanities that I can't say on this podcast that I was kind of aiming at the referee before I was aiming it at any of Middlesbrough's players or coaching staff because I actually felt that we did quite well. Similar themes again, where we do look a little bit lost in the final third. Better, I would say, yesterday, but a lot of my anger yesterday just was completely directed to the referee, which I'm sure we can't get onto.
Yeah, it's one of those where you don't want to get too drawn into it, but in the end, you concede the goal from the lad who should be sent off. Yeah, you can't help but feel a little bit hard done by with that. But yeah, we started relatively okay. One of those games where we were going to be the team that had to bring the game to them, really, despite them being the home side. They're obviously looking at it from the point of view of Middlesbrough second in the table. They've got some pretty good players throughout that team, and we're going to treat them with a little bit of respect and sit off and try and hit them on the counter. And that suits them as well, to be fair, with the players that they have, the wingers and a big centre forward up front that can sort of hold the ball up a little bit and win second balls and things like that. Yeah, it's frustrating that on a day where the surface was greasy and it was a grim day and the ball breaks in midfield and Conway nicks it away from Harris. He slides in, his legs high, his studs are up. Look, not like ridiculously high, by the way, but enough to fly through Conway's ankle if he doesn't move out the way sharply enough like he does. And yeah, you saw the reaction of the players as well. it's a bad challenge. It's a really frustrating one that he doesn't get sent off for that challenge. I don't think that there could be really too
I
much complaints from their side either.
Yeah, what I was going to say is if the referee had actually not bottled it and pulled out the red card and sent him off like he should have done, I don't think there would have been a mass protest from Oxford or any of their players or even Harris himself because he's got to feel lucky to stay on the pitch. And then after one of the worst refereeing performances in recent history, last time out at the Riverside, to which I couldn't believe. He got the red card wrong. Ayling and Beadle incident. Damari Gray's goal shouldn't have counted. I thought, well, it Mick McCarthy, it can't go on like this, can it? Well, actually, yeah, it can, because we somehow got a referee who last week or the last game prior to the international break got two major incidents wrong. This referee has managed to get three major incidents wrong, and there's two penalty shouts. The first one on Brown is for me a definite penalty. The second one, probably not, but you've seen them given. And these are all at 0-0 as well. So ultimately, when Oxford take the lead, the goal scorer is a player that shouldn't be on the pitch. And then you also factor in that if, because like you say, I thought we started well. It felt like one of those games. If Middlesbrough go ahead, they'll score a couple. And I know football's not always as kind of just straightforward as that, but Oxford are down there for a reason. Their heads would have dropped most likely, and it completely changes the whole outcome, the whole way and kind of flow of the game. If Middlesbrough get a penalty, yeah, you've still got to score it, but playing against 10 men, 1-0 up potentially, and it's a completely different game. And you've just been, and I know we don't, to be fair, and I try not to kind of go over the top on referees because a lot of the times this season when we've been beaten, yes, there's been bad decisions, but it's also been Boro at fault. Now, yes, you can look at Callum Britton tucking in too much or Morgan Whittaker not tracking his runner as well as he should for the first goal. But then that situation literally doesn't occur if the referee does his job. And I just, it infuriates me because I'm seeing the same referee. Is it Sam Allison? I think his name is the one that took the Birmingham game,
Yeah.
getting booed off from a WSL game. And I mean, in terms of a WSL game, the atmospheres are very like they are slightly different to the men's game. And I even saw males, females, like supporters of both clubs. I think it was Aston Villa, I want to say, saying in the women's game, it's not kind of typical that there'll be that much anger and aggression and kind of booing a referee off, and yet that happened to that referee. Now, two games in a row, he's had a shocker, and then we're getting another referee who's produced another horrendous performance, which is again resulted in Middlesbrough, not directly, but it's completely changed the outcome of the game, and yet I don't even really feel like there's any sort of punishment for it. And I know people make mistakes, but it's like on a consistent basis now. We've had all of the incidents yesterday. We had all the incidents against Birmingham. We had literally Joe Lumley nearly decapitating Tommy Conway in the box and no penalty. Sidney Peck was about chest height on Matt Target, I'm pretty sure, earlier on this season, doesn't get sent off. There's like so many different, and people kind of use the argument of, oh, well, it'll even itself out over the season. But I'm actually feeling like, and I'm not one for conspiracies, there's too many like absolutely blatant decisions just completely going against us at the moment. Like I say, I hate just pinning a blame on a referee, but yesterday was on a complete different level. And you'd like to think that if there is any truth in that statement that, oh, well, it'll even itself over the season, that we're due some luck or about 10 penalties in one game coming up really soon. Because, as Mick McCarthy says, it just can't go on like this. It is just totally, totally inadequate and just simply put, just not good enough.
Well, yeah, I was in the ground yesterday, so I've seen obviously the game and could sort of gauge that yeah, it's probably a red card that first challenge, and then the Brown first one was sort of looking at the referee thinking possibly I think he pointed to a corner, didn't he? But there was a sort of a little bit of a delay before he pointed, and then the other one I can actually like picture in my mind, and I thought that Brown sort of just throws himself over, and yeah, there is the slightest bit of contact there, but he's trying to get it, isn't he? Yeah, obviously Oxford's goal, as you mentioned, we actually create a chance down our right hand side, and Britain nearly, I can't remember if he puts a cross in or gets a shot off, but they literally come up the other end, spray a ball out to our left hand side. Curry's down the left hand side. Britain's tucked in, and I think he's tucked in mainly because the wingers just made a run into the box. Whitaker's slightly behind the play and is running back, but evidently not quick enough. And Curry is able to have all the time in the world, all that left hand side to himself. Ball's cut back to him, and it's a tidy finish to be fair on his left foot, just buries it in the near corner. And you just stood there in the away end, and I'm thinking, well, I'm hoping this is like last season where we go 1-0 down and 3-1 up at half time, but I can't see it. And we didn't really create all too much in that first half following that goal, really, did we? We had a couple of efforts from outside the box. Morris had a shot that went over the bar, which was relatively close actually in comparison to usual Aidan Morris efforts that usually at the back of the stand. But yeah, a Whitaker shot, but nothing really of note. And gets to half time, target's taken off with an injury, which look, it's frustrating. You look at our bench yesterday, and I'm like, where are half of the squad? Where, like, quite simply, where are they? And then you hear that Strelic and Nipan were both nursing knocks anyway after international break, played in training on the Friday morning, and both pulled out of the session and were left at home. Hansen, fair play, is probably still on the beers in Curacao for qualifying for the World Cup, so fair play to him. He'll be back for Tuesday. Obviously, Fry hasn't recovered well enough. Calf injury against Birmingham. Edmondson done his hip in training, and we've got Alex Gilbert and Micah Hamilton on the bench who've been playing for the 21s most of the season, and you just think, what on earth is going on? We've literally got Cali Sen, McGree's been on the other side of the world in the week, Morris the same, Jones the same. That those two have played. How come McGree hasn't? I suppose there's an element of managing him, considering
Yeah, yeah.
Australia just don't take him off. They have to play him for 90 minutes.
Yeah,
So
I did. Can I just say as well, like a little bit of a pet peeve during the international break? Really insightful interview regarding his injuries and how they've kind of finally, hopefully, got to the bottom of it. And Riley McGray, great interview speaking about how it's the biggest season of his career, both because of the World Cup, but also because Middlesbrough are in such a great position. And then they've just randomly got a dig in saying that, oh, there's been kind of comments made from Middlesbrough fans and a little bit of stick towards Riley McGree for not being fit enough. Like, and then it goes on to say in that article, alongside the Australian medical team and the manager, they'll manage his minutes. And yet, he did come on as a sub in the first game, but I think he played like 70 minutes in the second game. Well, Australia, yeah, okay, they're not really probably bothered about Middlesbrough, but we still pay his wages. So less of the kind of comments about Middlesbrough supporters, because we do pay his wages and also managing his minutes. Well, it doesn't really look like managing minutes to me. So whoever wrote that can get lost, to be honest.
yeah, but we didn't have anyone, did we, on the bench, which was the
No,
point.
no, that was the point, Nathan. And yeah, I mean, seeing Micah Hamilton and Alex Gilbert, as you say, on a substitutions bench. No disrespect to either of them, but for a team second in the championship, it's not really two kind of inspiring names to look at your bench when you a goal behind to try and get you back in the game.
Yeah, it's totally not. And obviously, you now hear the targets got a little bit of an injury, which was different to the foot injury that he had previously, which isn't great considering we have another 2 games this week coming up. You make that change and you're hoping that you can find yourself back into the game and I mean, well, sort of luckily we get ourselves back in quite quickly into the second half and give yourself the opportunity to then go on and win the game. Ball sort of breaks free in midfield. Morris does well to sort of gather it under his spell a little bit. Takes him a couple of attempts with it bouncing and bobbling around in the conditions. Drives through the centre towards the middle of the pitch. Plays a ball out wide to Callum Britton. He delivers a cross into the box, which from my angle looked really poor with just like scuffed low when there's number of bodies sort of clustering through the centre and it luckily for Boro it falls into the path of Whitaker and from first angle it looks like it just hits him and goes in, but having seen it back he actually does like turn his foot and direct it into the corner, gets us back into the game. It felt like right, okay, we've got ourselves back into it after a mistake, after Oxford's one chance of the game in the first half. And now let's go, let's kick on, see if we can get that winner. And my frustration again, it'll come down to the fact that for as much territory and as much possession as we have in and around the opposition area, we don't get shots off and test the opposition goalkeeper anywhere near enough as we should do. Whether that's, look, we had maybe 2 shots following that, which were Whitaker had an effort which was like a hark back to his Plymouth days where he decides to launch a missile towards the top corner, which was probably the closest I've seen him do in 11 months. And the other one, which I don't know how it stays out or how it doesn't go in, and I don't know who to blame, whether it's people making a case for the defender, giving him a nudge in the back. But Chris, it's I don't know how Luke Ayling's kept it in for a start in stoppage time at the end of the game. A delivery into the box. It looks like it's sailing out of play at the end of stoppage time. Ayling somehow gets beyond an Oxford defender and hooks it back in play, and it is literally on the line. And I don't know how Tommy Conway hasn't turned it in.
Yeah, I think in and I'm you're probably going to think that I'm just going to blindly defend him, and I'm not. I do actually think though that the chance is kind of not as just cut and dried as he's just mistimed his jump. Like I do think that when he does first jump, there's contact from an Oxford player, so that obviously skews his kind of balance and his ability to get to the ball. Yes, okay, a Tommy Conway full of confidence probably just makes contact and scores. But I think actually some of the kind of comments about that particular chance maybe a little bit unwarranted or just kind of, it's like he has to score, and I don't think it's as easy of a chance. Even it's definitely a chance, but I think the ball's like the angle in which I've seen one particular clip going round on Twitter, and it makes it look like he's just completely missed the ball. But actually, I don't think he necessarily kind of times his jump that badly, and I think the contact plays a part. But regarding a wider situation about Tommy Conway, me and you have gone back and forth about it on this podcast before. For me, I'm very much of the opinion that Middlesbrough are a worse side with him out the team, but there has to come a point. Almost, I would compare it to the Latte Laugh situation at the beginning of last season, where what was it? He went 11 games, I think, without a goal,
Yeah.
and Carrick eventually dropped him, and then he come off the bench and scored against Sheffield United. It kind of gets to a point where you do think, what does Cali Sen or Strelets, potentially if he's going to be fit for Tuesday night or Saturday, whatever, when do we kind of say you've not? I think it's 12 games now that he hasn't scored. When do you say, right, okay, it's probably time we give someone else a bit of a run of games at least in the nine because, ultimately Tommy Conway offers an awful lot and we're not going to kind of go over his pressing and his work off the ball and that kind of thing. because ultimately he's in the team to score goals, and he's not doing that at the moment. So if, for example, Cali Sen was to start on Tuesday night, I don't think Tommy Conway can really have any complaints. What I would also say, and this isn't just blindly defending him, because I think there is actual stats to say that out of sort of big chances, he's missed maybe the most in the league actually, or certainly amongst the top few numbers. So like the Leicester chance he's got to score. There's other chances I can think of where it's one of them where you just think a fully fit Tommy Conway of last season, for example, just sticks that away. And that's the case at the moment. What I would also say in defence of him is, as much as Morgan Whittaker scored yesterday and scored obviously against Ipswich, scored against Sheffield Wednesday, are wide players. And what's really, really worrying me is our wide players are just not good enough.
Yeah,
Their overall performance, and I know Whittaker scores, was I'm going to be pretty cutting here, just not up to standard. And Bergsorg the same. Is it the thing is with Bergsorg, I almost appreciate the fact that he is a squad player, and you know what you're getting with Bergsorg in the sense of you can probably throw him on in a variety of sort of game states, and he might use his physical presence to hold out a game, but also I think you saw against, I can't remember who it was now this season, but he's come off the bench earlier on this season and had impacts in games. He obviously scored in the Millwall away win, but you know that Bergsorg is just that. He shouldn't be starting games, but every now and again he's worth throwing on. Morgan Whittaker, and I hate doing it because he doesn't pick his price tag, but because of the expectation, because of the price tag, it's even more disappointing. And I think actually Bergsorg offers you not very much. Whitaker though, and it's almost it's kind of like a criticism and praising him in the same way. He picks up that many good positions and he gets the ball. A lot of our play does go through him, so I think when he makes a mistake, it highlights it more because he tends to kind of pick the wrong option or pick the wrong pass. But it's almost just it happens far too much that he picks the wrong option, and I think in terms of a physical ability, he's really, really easily kind of just moved off the ball. And for me, for everything that we've read and potential roles of players and how Hellberg likes to play, Kieran Scott, I'm sure, is he's no mug, but on his Christmas list, he's going to be asking Santa for two wide players that just have any ounce of ability to get past a fullback and deliver a ball in the box. And going back to the point about Tommy Conway, a lot of his chances that he has missed, he's still got to be taking them, but they're not chances that wide players are creating for him. They're chances that the Leicester centre half miskicks the ball and he goes through and still should score. But Bergsorg and Whittaker aren't helping his cause. They're really, really not. So yeah, Kieran Scott on your transfer list or your Christmas list, and all Boro fans' Christmas lists to Kieran Scott. I'm now imagining Kieran Scott and Chris Jones kind of dressed as like Santa and the elves around Rockcliffe, like penciling in what we want for the January window. Two wingers, please. Please, for the love of God, two high standard championship wingers. Because yes, the attacking play in the final third isn't great. There's not too much of a recognisable pattern of chance creation, but having those two on either flank do not help. And Hellberg coming in with those two scares me a lot. I'm not gonna lie.
yeah, it's certainly interesting because those are your two wingers, really. Hansen, okay, you can make a case for that he hasn't really been given too much of a go at all in the first 16 games. Obviously, started the one game and came off the bench a couple of times for a few minutes at Watford, a few
He
minutes left.
started at Portsmouth as well, didn't he? It was Sheffield United and Portsmouth. But in terms of
Yeah,
your point, he from his starts other than the impact that he made at Millwall away with that lovely turn. Every time and he hasn't had a lot of time in fairness to him, but even in his starts, there wasn't enough there to say, yeah, okay, he's got to play or give him a run of games, really.
But those are your options. You've got
Yeah.
three. You've got three. Whittaker, Bergzorg, and Hansen are your out and out wingers. You
I
could
mean,
do,
I
Chris,
mean,
the renaissance of Micah Hamilton.
yeah, well, I mean, dare I say, could he do any worse? Maybe, I don't know. But you've got Riley McGree there, but it's almost like Riley McGree can play as an 8, as a 10, and will do a job in just about anywhere. He's not really like a natural wide. Even when he plays on a team sheet, he starts as a wide man. He ends up drifting into the 10 position anyway, so he's not going to provide you width. So yeah, please. The overarching point that I'm trying to make is, I'll say it again, Kieran Scott, please bring us some wingers in January.
Yeah, it's it's one of those that we again come away from a game thinking what could have been a little bit yesterday
I think
with
that perfectly sums it up, really.
with you get a point away from home. It's not the worst result in the world against a side that look Coventry have been there this season and only got a point as well, and a couple of other sides as well being down there and sort of struggled a little bit against them. It's always difficult when you have to play against a low block and the impetus is on you away from home. But from the other side of things, it's they looked really poor and we just didn't create enough in the game to enough to win the game, really, did we? And now we move on to the biggie. And I think that everyone would have looked for this game at the start of the season and thought, right, when are we playing them? Is it either just one where we can just get it out the way in the early couple of weeks of the season and just, yeah, write it off? Because it doesn't matter how good they are, the result is the same. And it just so happens that this season they are the best team in the league, coupled with their inevitability that they've had for years, where even when they're down and out in games, even when they're 2-0 down at home, they somehow pull a couple of goals out the backside and they either get themselves a point or they win the game or they score in the last minute or something just lands their way, which means that they fall on the favourable side of a result. They are the scammiest team ever, but they're also the best team in this division. And the abundance of quality that Coventry have got all over the pitch is something to behold, really, isn't it, for the championship? And look, it's not sour grapes or anything about them being the scammiest team in the league either, because at this moment in time, they continue week in, week out to not just churn results, but just nail teams
They just
to the
dispatch
wall.
of everyone. Well, everyone other than Wrexham anyway. Yeah, they are, to be honest, at the moment, the numbers, the goal difference, they're just performing like a championship super team, really. Like Frank Lampard has them playing and scoring at a relentless rate. And they already had really good players, but what I think this season especially Lampard has managed to do is even the players where you would always think, yeah, he's a handy little player. Thomas Asante, I think he's right up there with the top scorers in the division for goals and assists. They already had Haji Wright, who obviously scores goals. Victor Torp, potentially in with a shout of being Championship Player of the Season so far, just seems to score an absolute worldie every time I see a Coventry game. Sakamoto is a wonderful winger. They've got Everon Mason Clark, who is really dynamic, great. The fullbacks, Jay De Silva, obviously if you've listened to this podcast for long enough, one of our good friends, Alex, would have completely written off Jay De Silva, and he seems to be performing like the reincarnation of Roberto Carlos this season. Van Ewijk is definitely the best right back in the division. They've even got a good goalkeeper this year, which they haven't that was their Achilles heel last season. two really, really top level championship centre halves, and they're just good all over the pitch. And my favourite, well, I say favourite, who I really admire in Coventry's team, and what I said last season, Matt Grimes has been kind of like a transformational signing for them. He is the championship Xavi, Iniesta, any top level midfielder over the however many years you could put his name into that bracket in terms of championship footballing ability. He's a really top player, and I've already seen people saying it's a free hit. I wouldn't quite say it's a free hit, but to put it bluntly, Coventry can come to the other side on Tuesday night and go 10 points clear at the top of the league. And what I'm going to say now is just mainly for Alex, if you're watching, if you go 10 points clear, or even just from this point, and don't get promoted from this point onwards, it is a historical bottle job because they're by far and away the best team. And if they don't do it, then they never will.
Yeah, it's certainly one that you would put in the history books. But yeah, they've got a fantastic squad, as you've just ran through there. And they've got so many different avenues of scoring goals, as you mentioned, all the players there. But they've also got Van Dijk's torpedo long throw into the box with Bobby Thomas's magnet bonce as well. So that's great. But yeah, they're fantastic, and they're going to get promoted out of this division this season. They are. The positive news is that despite them scoring a million goals a week, Haji Wright won't be featuring at the Riverside this week because he has a quad injury. And I think he's played 4 games against Boro, scored in 3 appearances. I don't know how
Well,
many he
that
scored
that's
because
a
he
bonus then, I suppose.
that's a bonus, yeah.
I mean, just anyone in a Coventry shirt, you could honestly go up to a random bloke that's never played football in his life, has had 10 pints and a curry, and say, mate, stick a Coventry shirt on, and he'd score against Middlesbrough. That's just how it goes.
Sounds like Alex. But
Yeah.
but uh but yeah, so the good news is Haji Wright is out. Bad news is Radoni's back. So there you go. That's it's
Let's
one of those
right.
things.
Let's just talk about the Derby game. I
Finish
don't
it
want to
off.
talk about them anymore.
Right. Positivity. Kim Hellberg's first game in charge, Derby County at the Riverside, Saturday afternoon, and John Eustace.
Yeah, I mean, he's one of those managers in the Championship that he is definitely. I think pragmatic would be a fair word to say, but his teams just have a knack of kind of coming out of games on the right side of variance. I don't think his teams are a particularly great watch, but he does every job he's had, he's done a good job. And Derby, obviously, there's a little bit of history there. They'll bring a good following, as will Coventry, in fairness. And up until yesterday, they'd been on a really exceptional run of form, actually, hadn't they?
Yeah, they'd won 5 games on the bounce before yesterday. Were 2-0 up in the game yesterday against Watford, and then in the end, hoid up the wall, really, and got beat 3-2. Yeah, it's one of those things. It can happen in the Championship. In the last couple of weeks, having watched Derby, a lot of their goals, a lot of their play was funneled through to Carlton Morris at the top of the pitch, who I know that you've really liked for years before he was at Luton, when he was at Barnsley. And yeah, the bonus is that I think he's the Championship top goal scorer at this moment in time, and he's in double figures already. However, I think something like 4 of those are penalties.
Well, knowing the referees at the moment, he's bound to get at least one. They'll give some dodgy decision and he'll probably get another penalty.
Well, the bonus is he came off injury after 20 minutes yesterday, and it looked quite, well, I say quite serious. Not wishing ill on anyone, but it looks bad enough where he'll miss our game next weekend. So that's a bonus from that sense. But yeah, they'll just put perennial thorn in Borough's side, Andy Vyman up front instead. So that's great. So there you go. So much for positivity. In come Coventry City and John Eustace to put the nails in the Borough coffin this week. But we shall honestly see. I'm really looking forward to, first of all, the Coventry game, just to see what they're all about more than anything, see what we can do up against them. And yeah, the main one that stands out's next Saturday. See what Hellberg's all about. Whether it's Hellberg or Hjelberg, first of all.
Yeah, that
As
that
we
needs cleared up, doesn't it? We kind of flitted between the two on this podcast, but even if it's wrong and it is just Hellberg, it feels like I've given myself some kind of like extra spice in this podcast by sticking a little bit of a pronunciation. You're usually the man for the pronouncing names on this podcast. So, no, it's been a pleasure, Nathan. It's an exciting week, hopefully. I mean, to be honest, we're recording this on Sunday night at this time of recording. There's not really a time frame on when we're expecting Hjelberg to be announced. It might be tomorrow. By the time this podcast is up, he may well be officially Borough's new head coach. So we'll kind of await that. And I've really enjoyed this podcast, just being able to talk and not have Jamie O'Hara shouting down my neck, to be honest. But no, I'm not going to speak out of turn there. If anyone from Sky Sports watching, I very much appreciate the invite, and I would love to come on again, myself or Nathan, just a Boropolis representative, a really cool experience. So, yeah, we'll not get drawn into that. But yeah, Nathan, thank you very much for your time. Thank you to any new Swedish subscribers or followers that may have spawned in and want to follow Borough from now on. And obviously, all of the support on the last podcasts, the last videos, and just in general, kind of subscribers and people that listen and watch. Really, really appreciate it. And please, if you are getting to this stage of the podcast and you're looking and watching our two ugly mugs on YouTube, please do subscribe because we are trying our best to achieve our goal of 1,000 subscribers. And I think we're just about there, about 860. So keep subscribing, please. But yeah, Nathan, unless there's anything else that you would like to add.
No, I don't think so. In fact, I'll put it to you just to end it off. How many points do you think we'll end on this week? Ow, ow,
6.
ow, ow. What on earth?
We went a little bit like, oh, we're scared, but we are second in the league ultimately. So no, I'll say that we will. The narrative is there, isn't it? AD Vivash being the second, only the second man to bring down the Coventry super team. It would be quite the story and quite the narrative. And then Derby as well, the Steve Gibson thing. Let's see how things pan out, but it's certainly going to be an exciting week and a fresh challenge and a total, I guess, route, the beginning of a new route into the unknown, which could well be the podcast title, to be honest. So thanks, Nathan, for coining that phrase at the beginning of the podcast. But yeah, I'll stop waffling and I'll say thank you very much for watching and listening to anyone that has done this week. And as always, me and Nathan really appreciate it. So once again, thanks for watching and listening. And that has been another episode of the Boropolis podcast.